Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili, Gianarakos. Said it a little differently this time. How you doing, brother?
Doing really well, Yariv. It's a holiday today in Canada, so can't go wrong having the Monday off. So to all my
No.
fellow Canadians who are off today, hope you're enjoying. From the Flyers perspective, obviously a lot of big news coming out since our last episode. Rick Tocchet hired as the 25th head coach of the
Yes,
franchise.
sir.
A really huge announcement. We personally didn't think it was going to come that soon, but there was obviously rumblings after our show last week that things were in motion. And then once we kind of finished recording, we realized, hey, like they're probably going to announce us within like the next day,
Yeah.
which is what happened. So a lot to dive into with the press conference with Tocchet, Briere, Jonesy, and then also a really great interview that Jason Martinez had with Rick Tocchet that we're going to get into as well. So a lot of good tidbits, and we're excited to kind of break it all down for you. How have you been, Yariv, just over, this weekend and then with all the news happening?
Good, man. It's good. I'm glad we have some distraction, because like I love the beginning of the off season. When when we're not in the playoffs, there is like a silver lining that we get, like, the promise of the off season. This is like where the positivity kind of kicks in until the
Yeah.
negativity kicks in. Like pretty much after preseason is when the negativity really starts kicking, and understandably so, especially over the past several years. But this is like kind of the fun time for us where we get to just brainstorm and speculate and you know uh, assume that things will go well, which doesn't always happen. But we have some good stuff. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about today, which is good. And we'll probably have that for the next, my guess, couple months, and then it'll go like dead silent for a while. But this is a good time right now. So I'm good. It's almost beach season, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's getting
And
warm here
yeah,
too, like in Canada, which is nice. So we're
yeah,
getting
yeah.
some warm weather. Can't complain, man.
Yes, I'm a warm weather guy. Luckily I have hockey when it's cold, but if I wasn't a hockey fan, I don't think I could handle the winter. To be honest with you, I'm
Well,
like
just
that.
playing, growing up, being on the ice in the arenas, like I don't mind the cold, but like obviously, hey, 15 degrees like Celsius, 20
I
degrees Celsius. What is that, like 70 Fahrenheit? Like if it's like 70, 75 Fahrenheit, I think that's like 20 Celsius. Like I can deal with that. If we could get that all the time,
it's
then let's go
perfect.
with it.
That's perfect. Yeah, I'm not complaining about how cold it gets here in comparison to how cold it gets in Toronto. But you know, I'm it's like my lowest I can deal with is like Philadelphia. Like I've dealt with cold, like very cold weather, and it's like I just don't leave the house.
It knocks
So
something out of you. You don't want to get
no,
out, that's for sure.
no. So summer is my jam. That's where I feel alive. So I feel good. All right, let's get into the sponsorships and all that stuff, and then we'll get into the show. Just want to remind everybody who's listening to please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications. Get notified when we release these episodes because we do them a little bit randomly. It'll be more consistent probably in the off season because we don't have to work around games. So that's nice. But so make sure you hit the like button and notification button. And if you could share it out, also a huge help. For the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a like and a rating if you can, or a follow if you can. We really appreciate that stuff. That helps our grow our show and get it recommended to other people. So if you have not done that so far and you're listening, please, please, please do that. We truly appreciate it. It's really all we ask of people. And also for our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. It's nice weather now, so waiting in line is not as punishing. Um, Also, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for your insurance adjustment needs. They will help facilitate the process between you and your insurance company and make sure you get the best claim possible and deal with all of the headaches that come with dealing with insurance companies. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also want to give a brief shout out to our partner, SportsSpider.com. Guys, if you're tired of searching for multiple websites for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, make sure to check out SportsSpider.com. Again, the link is in the description of this video and the audio. Make sure to check out SportsSpider.com. All right. So the big news is the coaching hire of Rick Tocchet. The subsequential news that we found out, and the credit to Charlie O'Connor for breaking this and doing the footwork to make sure that this question was answered. But Brad Shaw will not be returning. According to Charlie O'Connor, his best understanding of the situation is that Shaw would have had to re-interview for the position. Understandably so. He's kind of like feels a little shortchanged, and now he has to interview with the guy where, realistically, he pretty much earned the job to stay, but it seems like he kind of took destiny in his own hands. I'm sure he's going to find another job out there very quickly, especially as assistant coach. There's 100% a team going to be looking to hire him after what he did here in Philadelphia. Maybe he'll go for a head coach job in the AHL. That's possible too. So Brad Shaw
Yeah.
is out. But we do have the big press conference to talk about as well. Do you have anything to comment on, Vasili, first, before we move on from Shaw?
Yeah, just with Shaw, obviously, I think he did a really good job as the assistant. We saw some of
Hmm.
the developmental progress made, especially with the defenseman he worked with.
Yeah.
So I think it's tough just because you see him do such a great job, but it's a typical type of thing when you have such a coach like Tocchet coming in with the cachet that he has. Like we talked about it in the episodes leading up to, this show with the hiring. Obviously, when you have a coach like that, typically they're going to want to bring in their own staff. So and I think for Shaw too, and even Elliot Friedman mentioned this on 32 Thoughts, that he went so far in the process, like he was a finalist, that it was understandable he bowed out. Like it would be tough for him, like you said, to have re-interviewed for that assistant position. And then I did want to mention as well, like Briere had a quote on Shaw. He stated he was in the running, he was strongly considered all the way to the end. It was tough. He did a good job. We had the chance to get Rick Tocchet. It's nothing against Brad Shaw. And then Briere also said that Shaw, it's his choosing essentially not to like return in the situation. Like obviously they would have allowed him to re-interview for that assistant position, but it just was his decision not to do so. And Briere lastly mentioned if teams reach out to us, he's going to get a really positive review from our end, which is not surprising whatsoever
Yeah.
because he really handled the situation as a class act, right? Like
Yeah.
it was kind of tough if you think about it for him to be the interim, have to go through this process and lose out. Like think about that. Just I'm sure everybody's been through that situation where you really, were trying to look or go through an interview like for a job and you don't get it. So it's a bummer for Shaw, but for the Flyers perspective, they get their guy, they get Tocchet. That's obviously the prize that they were looking for here. So
Yeah. He will be missed. He was probably one of the best assistant coaches we've had here, at least publicly. We've had good assistant coaches here. Obviously, Craig Berube was a really good assistant coach here who ended up, taking a head coaching job and then having to move on. We'll see where Shaw ends up. I wouldn't be shocked if a team gives him an opportunity to be a head coach either. I think he was definitely a top candidate here, and I think if the Flyers didn't get Tocchet, Shaw would have probably been pretty high on their list of the candidates. So it's a shame that he had to leave this way. But the way I kind of look at it, and this is not a knock on him in any sense. I mean, we've been at the bottom of the league or mid tier for several years already. Like, we shouldn't cling too much to, again, it's not his fault, I think, but like the penalty kill wasn't top five again. He can't just make magic. So maybe it's good to get another voice in there too. Maybe that's the silver
freshen
lining.
it up, right?
Yeah, not that I
Exactly.
would have preferred Shaw to stay here, but I do see a silver lining with, there was the rumor of Luke Richardson coming in here as well, who was a head coach in his own right. Obviously, was a great defenseman in the NHL. I don't think we'd be losing that much if we can bring in a guy like Luke Richardson, right? Which again, ex-Flyer. I know everybody complains about that, but again, it would be a very good option. So I
Definitely.
think I think I'm interested to see who Tocchet brings in. So to move on to the big meat and potatoes. So the press conference happened. The Flyers invited alumni and season ticket holders and had the big event um, last week. It was a big deal, big conference. Lots of build up. I think the conference was good. I mean, it showed how good of a communicator Tocchet is, which we all kind of know already from him being on television. Obviously, that's his um, advertised persona as a coach as well coming in here. Definitely going to have a different relationship with the media than John Tortorella did. And I loved the combative nature
Not as
of John
tenuous, I don't
Tortorella.
think, right?
Yeah,
Like it
but
won't be as not to say tiring, but I just think
tiring's fine.
the
Yeah.
everyday back and forth between the media and Torts, I don't think it's going to be as much of a battle now with Tocchet, or it's going to be not to say that they're more like aligned in how things work in that sense, but it's he was a part of the media in Tocchet, so I think he kind of gets it a little bit more.
A lot less of the attitude of that's a stupid question, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And I don't think any of those things help Tortorella. I understand why he is the way he is because part of me is like that too. But when you're like in a front-facing communication position, probably best to avoid those moments. They're not going to help you, in your sell to the city, your sell to the players. And if he was doing it to the media, that means he might have done that to players behind the scenes too. Though Tortorella was always very protective of his players publicly, which was
Yep.
something that was admirable. I expect we'll still have it with Taka, but um, he was asked kind of a slew of questions. Vasili has like all of the quotes here, so I'm going to leave it up to him to read a lot of the quotes. But, the big thing was like the direction sell on the team. And that's the first thing I want to talk about is, and he talked about how Danny essentially sold him on the direction of the team. Again, Tocchet has had his options. I think this was one of his top choices for a various amount of reasons, and obviously the relationships he built, which is a very real thing in all of the professional world, not just in hockey. It's a very real thing. Like Dan Hilferty was brought in by Brian Roberts. They had a professional relationship together. He liked Dan Hilferty, brought him in. So far, Hilferty has been very good over Dave Scott. But if you look at what Danny Briere did, not only did he sell Tocchet on it, I think that is the same conversations that he's going to have with free agents. And not only does Tocchet become more appealing to free agents, one, he wasn't listed on that poll of coaches that people didn't want to play for, which is already a plus. But he was able to sell Tocchet on the vision that we have laid out here for 2 years already. That if you look and you break down their numbers and where they were going, it was always obvious that they were gonna get out of this, or at least in their mind, going to get out of this in about a year or so. But I thought it was very promising to see that Tocchet kind of bought into that, understood he was walking in, and talked about how there are pieces here that he thinks he can get more out of. Um,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
I
go
totally
ahead, Vasily.
agree. I would say in that press conference, it is very encouraging to see that the Flyers, it's not like just talk it, okay, Philadelphia was his choice, like I want to come here, let's get it done. It was more like, hey, I would be interested, but what's the reasoning behind that? What is beneficial for me if I come there?
Yeah,
It's almost like a what's in it for me as one of the top coaching candidates if I come to your team. Show me why I should do it, right?
right.
And Keith Jones had a great quote. He compared hiring Talk to more of a recruitment effort to convince him to take the job, which is essentially what you want. Like you want to be wooed into taking a job. You don't want to be convincing yourself that, hey, this should be a good fit, right? So Jones essentially said this. It was not like, oh, the Flyers called me. I want to take the Flyers job. We had to convince him and go through our roster and show him more than we show the media on where we're headed. Thankfully, he bought into what we were telling him and saw where our vision was and wants to be a part of it. He recognizes that it's going to be a team effort to get to the top. I'm just happy that he saw enough here that he wants to be a part of it with us. So just looking at, I mean, what the Flyers have laid out moving ahead, right? All the draft picks coming up in this draft, having Matvei Michkov, having a solid core of assets in terms of prospects that they already have in the AHL. And then you add in the cap space here coming in these next 2 seasons, it does make it an attractive position for a coach because you can see all the building blocks and the foundation of a team that's ready to take that step into potential contendership. And with a coach like Tocchet, right? Obviously, the free agent talk comes about within the press conference about how he's, a really great communicator, has great relationships with players, has built strong relationships around the league, so that will bring players into the fold in free agency. And if you think about the timing of it with all the cap space opening up, getting this coach in there that does have the type of reputation, does build those relationships, it's almost perfect timing in the sense that, hey, you have all this space opening up and you switched out the coach that historically players hate to play for with a coach that players typically love to play for. So
Yeah, which is a really good sign. We probably it's probably the best way to transition out of because I think it's easy to forget this team was mocked as being a team that gave up, that wasn't hard to play, against, that, didn't grind out games, that didn't
yeah.
meet their
And kudos
potential.
to Tortorella. He
Right.
reinstilled that whole process,
Exactly.
right?
He did lay the groundwork there. And what I found was interesting about the sell, he also mentioned goaltending, which I thought was interesting, where he talked about having a couple of young guys, which they talked about Zavragin
Oh,
and
of course.
Bjarnason, obviously, to be like, hey, look, we know our goaltending is shaky, but like we have a couple guys in the system. And that is a sell. And again, I don't know if it would sell a Connor McDavid, right? Like I know that's the prized potential free agent, which let's be honest, we have no idea if he even makes the free agency.
Yeah,
But
especially if Edmonton wins the cup.
but for any player, right, that is available out there, maybe they're not even like the best player in the league, right? Maybe they're just a really good player and they're exactly what we need. You can sell them on all of the same things that Tocchet. And now they have a coach that, quite frankly, has gotten a lot out of the star players he has had. And he's like a player's coach who has empathy with players. So I thought it was very positive to hear that he
No,
had to be
definitely.
sold and that Danny was able to sell him because
Uh,
I think Danny's selling ability is highly underrated.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's some people that maybe they're not sure about the vision of where things are going just because they haven't completely bottomed out. But I think they're trying to do it in a way where, as we see with Buffalo, right, bottoming out all the time isn't always successful. I think they're trying to do it in a way where, hey, we can still add high-end assets through the draft, but then we can also build our team up and not completely strip it down to the core, right? And that's kind of what's happened here. And now they're getting in a position to maybe add some more. I think Talkett's essentially the first piece of that, right? Like you're adding in your coach. He's going to have certain, not to say certain players that he might want you to go get, but you're going to want to ascribe to his philosophy, his systems, things like that. And that's something interesting, right? Is, Talk gets a really significant deal, like 5.25 million contract, one of the highest paid coaching deals, very, very lucrative. I could see how some people might be a little wary of paying him that much money, just in the sense that, hey, like he's only made it to two playoff bursts as a head coach. He only has a record of 286, 265, and 87. But I do think just where this team is positioned for the Flyers, this is a coach and it is a hire that makes perfect sense. And I think the communication, that's what it really goes back to for me. Like, I think when you look at turning the page on where the team was to where they're going, right? Like, think about John Tortorella. He brought all those things out of the Flyers in the sense of got them to work hard, got them back to being a competitive team, got them back to being a team that's respected. And if you don't show up against them, you're not just going to have an easy night. But I think in the locker room, in terms of like the communication and maybe what was going on behind the scenes with the players, just got to a point where it was just not able to continue anymore. Obviously, we saw a situation with Couturier, we saw Cam York. I think this is like perfect in the sense that you're turning the page on a guy that probably wasn't the best communicator, probably could, due to that, caused issues potentially in your locker room. And now you're switching and flipping to a guy that is completely the opposite, right? He
Personality
is,
wise,
yeah,
yes.
personality wise, very welcoming in a sense of communication, but also like just in general, like how many times did we hear in this press conference and leading up to this and all the quotes surrounding talking of how great of a teacher he is, how great of a communicator he is, and how much and how important is it for him to communicate with his players effectively. So I just think where you're going, like if you are concerned that, hey, the record's not that great, only two playoff berths, I think with a young up and coming team like the Flyers are, we have to remember they're one of the youngest teams in the league still, and they're looking to get potentially even younger, adding in guys like Lachenko this season and Grabenkin and other younger
And bump,
players.
yeah.
Yeah, you want to have a guy in this coaching role that is going to be conducive to teaching and communicating with these players, because I think as Tocchet said, right, and I'm going to get into even more quotes with him and what he mentioned about the communication, but like having it be a two-way street with players and not just saying, hey, this is it, this is the way it has to be, it's so beneficial these days because the modern day athlete, they don't just want to be told what to do, obviously.
Yeah, and there's some ex free agents out there or ex star free agents out there, like a guy like Matt Duchene, that maybe, especially if he wins a cup this year with Dallas, maybe that's a guy who would consider coming over here on a short term deal because,
You
he
have
would
a
like
guy
to play.
like Tocchet,
Right.
exactly.
He'd be like, you know what, playing under Taka would be pretty cool. Like I hear really good things about him. And I think there's a lot of positives that come from hiring Rich Tocchet. Also, like his record is indicative of the teams that he coached as well. It's not like he was it's not like he was given a team that, hey, this is a Stanley Cup contender
No.
and we expect to be winning every year. He was not given that situation once, not even with Vancouver. And he managed to win a Jack Adams trophy there,
And that was an
converting
impressive
that team.
facet, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that was impressive.
And
And Briere mentioned that. He essentially just said, right, like building those long-lasting relationships, coupled with the teaching, the communication skills, it all factored into the hiring. He mentioned too that like the tenure with the Coyotes, like you said, like you're with an underwhelming team on paper, not having really a chance to make the playoffs at all, being able to bring that team to the playoffs, being able to coach that type of team and work with them and get them to actually get to that point versus where they were projected to be. Like that's not something to take lightly, right? Because
totally.
not a lot of coaches can bring that out of teams. And then Briere also mentioned too in the presser just the success with Pittsburgh, right? You can't overlook that, even though he was an assistant. Those power plays under the Penguins, and I know everybody can say that, oh, they had Malkin, they had Crosby, Letang. Well, those Penguins power plays still have those players, and they were abysmal this season.
Well, they were
So
even worse the season before.
and that's what I mean,
They were
right? So
bottom
like
of the league too.
you go back to it and you look at Tocchet's success on the power play. I think that's a really big factor into it, right? Like those cup winning teams for the Penguins in those seasons, the power play was clicking in
Yeah.
those playoff series, was clicking all around in those
Yeah.
seasons. So I think you look at the Flyers and just how bad they've been on the power play too, and the fact that he's typically had success, like as a coach with his teams on the power play. Like even look at those Coyotes teams. I'm pretty sure their power plays weren't that bad also. So
Yeah.
I think that's a huge factor too, because if you're looking at this Flyers team, like you cannot go into next season here with a bottom five power play again with a new coaching staff. That would
No.
just be horrendous. So
Yeah, no, I agree. That would be completely unacceptable. And also remember that when it comes to the money that Taki got, everything in business, not everything, but 90% of business is leverage. And the reality is, if you look at the coaching candidates that were available, yes, Quenneville had a big name, but he was essentially ousted out of the league, right? So he didn't have a ton of leverage. He was kind of
not as
like,
much
okay,
cachet as he used to have, let's say.
right. Exactly. And Tocchet had all of the leverage. Not only did he walk away from the Vancouver job where they tried to keep him, and I did read a lot of the fan base from Vancouver, they are not happy he is gone. So this is not a guy who was like maybe they were keeping him or not. Like they wanted him back. He walked away. He had another job on the table to work in media if he wanted it, where he's one of the top people in hockey media from a broadcasting standpoint. And then also the fact that there were several jobs available. And so
Several teams in pursuit, right?
so you can think of him as the top free agent available, and the Flyers went out and got him, and the top free agent gets the most amount of money. So that is a big reason why he got the money he got. Maybe if it was a much more competitive market and he was fired, maybe he wouldn't have got five, maybe he would have got 3.5, 4. He
Yeah,
cashed in on his current, and this might end up being his last NHL coaching job for
he
all
is
we know.
61. Yeah.
Right.
And the Flyers said, right, they view him as the long-term solution. And with the 5-year deal, to me, that sounds like they view him as the guy that's going to start bringing them into the playoffs and into contention eventually.
Yeah,
Elliot
totally.
Friedman on 32 Thoughts, like he mentioned, it was intense contract negotiations. And it makes a lot of sense to your point, right? Because he was the top free agent. It's not like it was just the Flyers pursuing him. Like, of course, he loved the fact that he was a Flyer and would have preferred to go to Philadelphia due to that. That was a big factor for Tocchet because he even mentioned in his Flyers daily interview with Jason Martinez that we're going to get into it as well that it was a full circle moment for him, right? So he mentioned that, but with all those teams pursuing him, like if the Flyers lowballed an offer or something, he was gonna go with the team that was gonna pay him the
It was
most at
a
the end of the day, right? So
yeah.
like when you are in that position where you're the top free agent, that's when it comes to being a player or a coach in the situation. Like naturally, you're gonna demand that type of money, and if teams aren't gonna pay it, then you're gonna be like, hey, I'll see you later because to your point, they have the leverage. So
Yeah, and I was listening to a Bruins YouTuber And he was just so pissed about the Bruins not getting Tocchet. And they were very down on their team, like they don't want to spend the money, blah blah
Yeah,
blah.
yeah.
But it just, it sounded like people complaining about the Flyers. But he had two very good opportunities. Obviously, the Flyers are a historically successful team, a prize team. So are the Bruins, right? And then Seattle was out there with a slew of young talent in a very cool city, not far from where he was playing. So the Flyers had to beat out other teams to bring him in here. And I'm sure those aren't the only teams. Those were just the top teams. And there are some teams that might have even fired their coach to bring
Yeah.
in Rick Tocchet out there, which we have seen happen in the past. So I think they did a very good job selling the top guy. Whether he'll work out for all those 5 years, I don't know, but we'll get a pretty good indication. Maybe not this year, but by the second year when the Flyers do kind of go out
Yeah.
and bring other things. Now, the other thing he brought up was the Four Nations coaching Travis Sanheim, coaching Travis Konechny, and I really liked what he said about Sanheim. That they weren't sure about what his role was with the team because they were like, well, he's a good defender, but like look at the names we have here. And he kind of brought up how he held his own and how he's like that was a high class situation. He even talked about it with himself, how being around John Cooper, like these are the best of the best
And you
that
can
this
learn from that. Yeah.
right. And how he learned about Sanheim and watching him step into that position. That's how we kind of view Sanheim as a complimentary top pairing guy. He's not a number one defenseman on every team, but he is a guy who can play a top pairing role with a number one defenseman. Or if it's on a championship squad, he could at least be a number three guy, right? But he's a highly reliable defenseman. And I thought it was really good to hear that. And, you throw in what TK has been doing in the IHF tournament. He's got 3 goals, 6 assists in 5 games.
He's
You
second in
know,
scoring, I think, something like
right?
that.
Yeah, it's like these guys are, two of our prize guys do have a name amongst star players. I think that also helped. We have a tendency to talk down these guys. I heard it with Claude Giroux for a decade about how he was an elite. If you go back and look at the draft, he was the best player taken in that draft. He was the first overall pick or should have been the first overall pick. So it's like, and yet I heard people downplaying it all the time. Yes, Konechny is not the top player in the league in his position, but he's up there in that name. And same with Sanheim, right? There are only like 15 number one defensemen in the NHL, if that even.
Yep.
So you got to think about Sanheim when he talks about a guy like Sanheim. He's like, okay, this is one of the guys I have to work it with. I got an opportunity to look at him. He obviously can play big minutes against and with the best players in the league. These are selling pieces as
That's
well.
enticing for
Yeah.
sure, right? Like you already have that type of piece, that complementary type of player. Like for me, like I said, I keep going back to the communication thing. Like I think was a really big deal. Like Tocchet mentioning that while
Yeah.
he was a player, right? Typically you do anything the coach wanted you to without much of a care. Whereas like the athlete today is always asking questions, wants to understand the reasoning behind things, the strategies, the tactics that, a coach might be putting into place on the ice. We've heard it before, right? Like we talked offline that even Tortorella stuff like that, that's always why with the modern day athlete. Even Scott Gordon brought that up, one of the interim head coaches for the Flyers a while ago. Just that the modern day athlete just wants to know more. And I think just the way Tocchett's kind of approaching that relationship, it's encouraging to me because you just look at really the success of this team going ahead is going to be on the back of the young players, right? Off of a Michkov, off of these young guys that we're developing, like a Lachenko, whoever is going to be the first overall pick or the sixth overall pick for the Flyers, this season here. That's going to be the foundation of the core. Like you have a Sanheim, you have a Konechny. Those guys are in their prime right now. They're going to be good players for you while you're getting into that space, but it's really about the development of these young guys, right? So when Tocchet for me mentioned, this quote, like you have to be a partner with the players. It's not a dictatorship. There has to be accountability. Don't get me wrong, but it's important to let the players help steer the ship. To me, that statement above, like that's so important, right? Because it shows that it's a two-way street. Like he wants to have an open dialogue surrounding the on-ice strategies. He wants players to say, hey, this isn't working. This is what I think we should do. He's open to ideas and open to players bringing things like that up to him. And
Hmm.
not to say that, Tortorella wasn't a coach that was open like that, but I think we can all probably look at it and say that those conversations probably weren't happening out in the open like that in the locker room with him, most likely, where we weren't there. We don't really know, but I just think it's safe to bet that the openness Tocchett's looking for probably isn't the norm in the NHL within locker rooms currently. So just to be able to have that relationship with your young players, build that trust, I think that goes a huge and long way in their development overall, right? So
Yeah.
I just think developing young players, like to me, that seemed like what the main goal is out of this hire for Briere before this was announced, right? He said whoever the next coach is has to be a great communicator, a great teacher. And from what Tochet's saying, at least at this point, it seems like that's top of mind for him. And I think if you want to get to where you're going with this organization going ahead, so many draft picks, so many young players, you're going to have to hit on a lot of the guys you drafted. You're going to have to develop them. And I think the communication's a key part of that.
Yeah,
So
he seems to have a little bit of the Again, I don't want to put that pressure on him, but he seems to have a little bit of the Rod Brindamore vibe, right? Like
I
again,
agree. Yeah.
a successful NHL player who is very physical, who did it on the ice, is like historically was historically loved as an athlete, pretty much
Yeah.
wherever he went. He does, and he's got that cool guy vibe. You know what I mean? Like, not only is he friends with Wayne Gretzky and he's friends with Mario Lemieux and he's friends with like he's got a little bit of like the Keith Jones vibe
Yeah.
to
I
him
agree.
too. And I think that's good. That's a really good transition. And look, credit to the Flyers. I mean, they released that video with Sean Couturier, and it was a little bit staged,
Yeah.
obviously, but I thought it was a really good sentiment. One, it points out the fact that we were right, that obviously there's a separation between Couturier and Tortorella, and they wanted to be like, no, we found a coach now who is going to align with our captain, right? That we're gonna
Players
have.
first type of coach,
Yeah,
essentially.
so we're gonna have, yes, we grinded our team. Like Jones and Briere have been listening. Like we grinded our team, we put them through the ringer. We knew we were doing something like pretty intense to them, and now we kind of let off a little bit and be like, okay, you guys kind of earned this at the same time. You earned a coach that he's gonna be a systems coach and he's definitely gonna be a tough guy, but we brought in a guy that we love his
Yeah.
personality. So we hope that
No,
you will love his personality.
totally. But I think that I totally agree with that, right? Like I think for the players, it's almost like when you put them through this to kind of develop these good habits and this
Yeah.
structure with Tortorella. And now it's like, okay, this is almost like a reward. Here's the players coach. And to your point, like I think he's still going to be a tough coach. But when I say players coach, I mean in the sense that Rick Tocchet himself was a player in the
I mean,
NHL.
Rod Brindamore is a tough coach to play
But
for.
he's also a great communicator, great relationships with his players. And I think
Right.
it can't go understated that having Tocchet in here and the fact that he was a player himself, I think that's a huge thing. Like, look at the
Yeah.
Flyers, look at the past hires. Like going into this, right? Like after Berube, you go to Hackstall, did not play, was not a player, right? After that, you go to Vigneault, was not a player in the NHL. You get Scott Gordon in there as the interim, whatever. He was a player, okay, but that's an interim. I don't really count that. You get
He
Tortorella
was
in
well
there.
liked though.
Yeah, for sure. But you get Tortorella in there, not a player either, right? So I think it's been almost a decade of
It
coaches
was
that were
Berube and Bill Barber were the last
no,
two guys.
that's what I mean, right? So like you've the last decade, you have not had a player as a coach. I think it's time to go back there, especially after Tortorella, to get a guy who's a former player. He understands the players himself. He was a guy that was in that position. I think it's just really beneficial because I think it's easier for a coach to relate to a player when they've been in the situation that they've been in. Like Tocchet's been in those hard playoff
Yeah.
series. He won two cups with the Penguins. He's been in the trenches battling, in those tough board battles in front of the net. Like it's easier for him to understand maybe where a player might be coming from because he's been there himself. So I think that's just
Yeah.
that's an
100%, bro.
invaluable thing, right, in the locker room. And I
Yeah.
think that when you've gone that long without having a voice like that in there, like even though you did have Rocky Thompson and stuff who was a player, like is he the same level of a Tocchet? Like obviously not, right? So I think just having that player's voice, a guy that can understand the locker room a little bit more based off where you were with a guy like Tortorella and even before maybe with a Vigneault, I think it's the perfect type of hire for kind of where you're going with these young players and needing to develop them in the right way. So
That's why I like the Luke Richardson idea too, because it fits that mold as well. And
even
I
Recchi, I heard Recchi as a rumor
oh my
online.
God. That
So
see I hear that and that's like a dream to me. The same thing I loved
yeah,
the
that'd be
idea of bringing
awesome.
Patrick Sharp and John LeClaire in, and there were rumors of Lindros coming in at some point as well. Um, I actually love these things, and Danny Heatley is part of the organization. Obviously, Wayne Simmons is now part of the organization as well, but
Yeah.
he's doing outside work. I actually love these things, and people like look down on them. I don't, and especially in Rick Tockett's thing, like the guy did his rounds, just like Briere did his rounds, right?
Well,
Like
it's not like he
Briere
was just a
started.
fly. It's not like he was just a flyer for his whole career. Like he left, went to multiple other organizations and had success before he came back, right?
Yes, 100%. And but he also worked his way up too, right? He
Oh, of
did the
course.
assistant coach thing, just like we saw Briere be GM of a juniors team,
From
right?
the
And
early
and then
2000s, like Tocchet was a coach in the early 2000s as an assistant. So,
right, exactly. And Briere went and did assistant coaching job. He went to school. He went back to school to learn. Like it's almost like it's the same thing as prospects. Like you want these guys to develop
earn
and
it.
then earn it and then come back here and have that success. It's very different than like the Paul Holmgren thing where he went from coach to GM to president, right? Where it was kind of just de facto. And I know people like to talk shit on Holmgren, but if you really look at Paul Holmgren, he was a very good general manager. He made bad mistakes at the end, but his first half was very good. And same thing with Bobby Clark. Like you guys can be upset that they're ex-Flyers, that they didn't win a cup, but how successful was this organization bringing outside people in here? No more successful, if not worse. It doesn't mean that outside can't work. It also
Yeah.
doesn't mean that inside can't work.
I
It
think it's
just
a
means
wait
you
and
have to
see,
find,
right?
right. It's a wait and see, and it's just about finding talent. And the reality is, if you look around the league, the guys that the Flyers have brought in to the NHL tend to make a large impact. Look at Chris Knobloch, who I don't remember anybody crying when he was removed from the Flyers staff. And he is coaching the Edmonton Oilers, has gotten them to play. Yes, they have the best team they've ever had. And yes, they have McDavid and Draisaitl, right? But it's clearly not all of that, right? Like
Yeah.
it's very difficult to get to that point, and he got the team to play. They have secondary scoring. They know how to shut down games now. He's a good coach, and nobody here thought he was a good coach. Nobody here like went. They knew he was a prized, juniors coach, but nobody here walked away with, "Oh, Chris Knobloch, we can't lose him." Right? He developed into that. Right? That's what we're looking for. We're
Yeah.
hoping now that after everything Tocchet has been through, when he comes here, fresh start with this roster of young guys where the team can be built around his playing style over the next 3, 4, 5 years, right? That's what we're hoping for. And it's going to take more than 3 years of being competitive to win a cup. And I can show you several teams in the NHL.
Carolina,
Carolina, Edmonton,
Dallas.
Dallas, Florida. All of these teams did not become great overnight outside of Vegas, who had the luxury of teams not knowing what they were doing in that expansion draft and just giving away really good players. And look at Seattle,
Yeah.
right? They didn't experience that. So that was a huge mistake by the GMs at the time. But that was the only example we had of a team coming in and just being and it still took them several years. They didn't win overnight. You need to be very good for at least 5 years to win a cup. Like that's the reality of it.
You have to establish yourself, exactly.
Yeah, Tampa Bay lost how many times before winning a cup, right? And then they hit that level.
Well, you have
We're
to
gonna
lose. You
we're
have to
gonna talk
lose to
about the Leafs
learn.
in the second half. I'm looking forward to that conversation. Kind of
Yeah,
lines
but
up.
you got to lose, right, to learn in those experiences to be able to kind of get to that next level and come through and end up getting the win and like get the cup in those
Yeah,
situations. I think to your point, like Tocchet kind of went and like you said, was an assistant for years, went to TV, was a head coach of other teams. He learned a lot of valuable lessons, obviously, through those experiences, built a lot of, relationships around the league. And ultimately became a respected coach, right? Like, think about it. Won the Jack Adams. Like, you're not winning that, award if you're not a respected coach at your job throughout the league and have shown that you can execute at a high level at what you do. And I mean, I think it's pretty evident that just based off, the relationships he's made. And Briere mentioned it that a big part of it is going to be okay. Now we can entice players to kind of come here, right? Entice free agents,
yeah,
entice
yeah.
players to
He
want to
mentioned it
accept
himself.
trades to want to accept trades to come here. Whereas I think once again, like turning the page on Tortorella, who's the complete opposite of that, where he would probably scare free agents away from wanting to come here and play for him and have to deal with
And
his
media
training
people.
camp. Yeah,
Yeah,
that too, right? So I think like I said, it's almost perfect timing that you're flipping the page completely, going from a guy that maybe was probably stopping you, detracting you from potentially signing free agents to a guy that might even have, agents calling you to get their players potentially signed or interested, to joining the team. So here's Brier's quote about that. Briere believes that having talk in the full will help make Philadelphia a destination players want to go to. He said on my end, there's no doubt that Rick is going to make us more enticing for players to come here. There's no doubt about that. There's already agents calling, letting us know that. And that's kudos to him, to the relationships that he's built and the reputation that he's built over the years. It's so positive in that regard that there's no doubt in my mind that, yes, it's going to make us more of an attractive team to join. I just think ultimately, like the cachet Tocchet has, the relationships around the NHL, right? I think that's going to be really crucial now with the cap space opening up. You can, have the ability to add those types of players. They're not going to be wondering, oh my God, is John Tortorella going to yell at me in the locker room if I come to the Flyers or something like that, right? So
Yeah.
I think even though it's like we almost laugh at it, it is a big deal that you kind of
Sure, of
switched
course.
over into that type of coach that players want to genuinely play for. So
Because we want players to want to play here. We want to be in the
a
driver's seat.
destination. Yeah.
Yes. Um, Before we transfer over to the Flyers daily interview, any other quotes you want to whip out that we can specific to the press conference?
Those were the main ones. I just thought like my main takeaway, obviously, I think is the fact that Tocchet being a great teacher, great communicator. I think that was the high level, high level skills that they saw with him that was going to make him a great fit for this job. And then also the free agent thing. I think those are the two main things for me.
Yeah, I guess we could talk about the Elias Pettersson, JT Miller question that came up at some point. I thought he answered it the best way he could without throwing anybody under the bus. Like, yeah, he did kind of mention JT first and then kind of threw in Elias, kind of caught himself being like, well, I don't want to throw Peterson under the bus and saying that, hey, sometimes both guys are good. And you can see that in the decision that Vancouver made. If Pettersson was that bad, they would have just taken the loss and traded him on the
Yeah,
value and
exactly.
kept Miller. So it clearly was a problem between those two guys. I'm not going to beat up on Tocchet for it. There's no evidence of that happening in the other teams he was coaching, right? I think it was just a tenuous situation,
I feel like it was long
and I think
standing.
I blame both of the players personally.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of see it. Is like
Well, those guys were there before he was, right? So I have to imagine whatever issue they might have had.
he walked into it. Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't to the level that it got to. It hasn't didn't escalate to the point it eventually got to where they had to trade guys, but I feel like there was always probably some sort of issue between them even before Tocchet came here. So how are you as the coach now? Like, sure, maybe it can be your job to come in here and try to resolve a long-standing issue between guys, but hey, if two guys just don't like each other and they didn't like each other before you even got there, I mean, how is that really your like?
Yeah.
That's not to say like that's your fault. Like that can't really be your fault as the coach. These are grown men, they're professional athletes. At a certain point, you guys are two grown professionals making millions of dollars. If you can't put aside your differences, I think that's your own problem, not the
Yeah.
coaches.
And
So
he managed to subdue that problem at least in the beginning because he won a Jack Adams trophy with those two guys on his team. So,
yeah,
uh, I think I can understand why people would say it's his responsibility. It is his responsibility. But when I kind of look at it, the NHL, two grown men, right? Guy at 26 years old and another guy's 29. It's like, okay, like you guys got to figure this out. You obviously have a problem with one another and you couldn't put it aside. So, I more look at that as like, I probably don't want either one of them on my team,
yeah,
quite frankly.
agreed.
Now maybe that's wrong, but that's how I would kind of look at it from the outside and be like, okay, whatever. Maybe there is a right and wrong with these situations, but I kind of look at it as like, I'd rather just not. Um, it doesn't usually pay off. You could be right, but it doesn't usually pay off to like grab onto those guys. But it's good. It's good that we have talking. So let's move on to the Flyers Daily interview. Now, the biggest thing that stuck out to me, even though definitely make sure to go listen to Jason Bertidis. I mean, Vasili hit me up about this like earlier today, and he's like, "Hey, make sure you listen to this episode." It had more nuggets in Martinez's episode, like one-on-one interview with Tocchet, understandably so, than the press conference.
Yeah, agreed.
It was a good interview, so definitely make sure to check out Jason Martinez's episode with him. But I really hemmed in on what he was talking about with Mitchkov, and he kind of answered. He answered two questions in one there, where he's like kind of talking. They're talking about dumping Chase and the effectiveness of it and how Florida is the dump and chase team. But he also kind of went like, okay, but like, do you guys actually think I'm going to ask like Matvey Michkov to play a dump and chase system? He's like, no, that's like crazy. He's like, I'm gonna, he's like, I want him to be creative. He even mentioned in the press conference that he wants to learn from Michkov. He's like, that's a high hockey mind. So obviously Michkov was a big part of the conversation in getting
Yeah.
Tortorella to getting Tocchet here. And then he also talked about helping him become a superstar. He obviously used the other names of Malkin and Crosby and Stamkos, right? Only some of the star players. He didn't even mention Quinn Hughes, right? Of guys, how they got to the level. And he said it's not just the skill, and we've talked about on
You
here.
gotta
It's always
work. You gotta
it's a
work, right?
combination of the work ethic and the skill that make the superstar players. Like people in Philly love to talk down on Sidney Crosby, but that guy is a dream player to have on your
He's
team.
driven, man. Very
Yeah,
driven.
and you never hear anything bad at him unless it's Philly, where we're the ones calling him babies. Nobody
Yeah.
else is calling Crosby a baby. Like, let's be honest,
At this
right?
point,
So
he's earned the respect even of Flyers fans, I would say, probably
I would
most of them.
kill to have him here at 40.
Yeah, no,
Please.
definitely. I think too, I mean, at least with the hard work thing, talking about how, Michkov has the mentality of wanting to be the best, but he still has to put the work in. I think we've seen that he's really driven, loves to train in the off season. So I think there's no issue there. Like I think Tocchet realizes
And
Michkov
he
is a
said
hard
that
worker too.
too.
So it's
Yeah.
gonna, yeah, he did. He mentioned that Michkov, it doesn't seem like there's any issue of him putting the work in. And that's important that Tocchet not only recognizes that, but even the fact that Tocchet recognizes, hey, Michkov's a special player. Like I can even learn from him in terms of certain things on the ice, right? It goes back to what he said in the presser with Briere that it needs to be a two-way street between
Two-way
players.
street.
Like
Yeah.
maybe Michkov sees certain things on the power play on the ice that, hey, maybe we should do that. It'll result in more scoring chance to be created. But if you're the coach and you're stuck in your ways, you don't listen to your player. You're never gonna get the insight into a play like that or something like that. And sometimes it's hard to get into those conversations. But I can read the quote out,
Yeah,
right? So
please.
basically, what happened is Jason asked the question about style of play, essentially in terms of the assumption is on social media because you played when you played that you just want to defend and get to the red line and then dump and chase. And then Jason says, what do you want to do? Like a 2-1-2 forecheck? You want to attack and really be aggressive offensively and create those turnovers and chances off of it. And then this is what Tocchet replies. He says, Florida, the Stanley Cup champs, they're probably one of the biggest dump and chase teams in the league. So you know what you do is look at your roster and come up with somewhat of a system. The concepts and ideas are the same. Do we want to dump the puck in all the time? No. You got to be calculated though. Jason then says, 1-on-4, you obviously dump the puck. Tocchet's reply, exactly. Or you make sure the puck's dumped in when all guys, their feet are pointing north, going to get the puck. You don't want to be dumping the puck when you're going east-west, but yeah, there's a give and take. Some of the best teams in the league over the years, Vegas, really hard team to play against, really intelligent without the puck. I thought the last couple of years of Vancouver defensively without the puck, we were a very intelligent team. I think you have to have that intelligence and you have to have that mindset. But saying that, you got to coach creativity, and don't get me wrong, you got to push the envelope. We've already talked about ways of scoring, like use the weak side more, activate the weak side defenseman a lot. Is there a little risk to it? Yeah, there could be some risk, but I think the reward has to be big if you play certain styles. So you're always going to get your detractors when it comes to that. In Vancouver, we had a lot of injuries last year, so we had to play a certain way to stay in hockey games. I'm not going to apologize for that. Jason just said you have to simplify it. And then Tocchet says, but you got to be crazy. I mean, do you want a Michkov to dump the puck at every time? Of course not. You want him to be a creative guy who can make plays. So there's a give and take. You got to find that balance.
Yeah, no, that's a great quote. And you look at some of the players on this team that would excel in a dump and chase, and obviously Sean Couturier comes to mind, Noah Cates comes to mind, Ryan Paling comes to mind, Tyson Forrester comes to mind, right? Like there are
Of
players out
course.
there that he could tailor his style to to fit this roster for this upcoming season, which again, the Flyers are going to look to get better. They're not looking to become a Stanley Cup contender overnight, right? So he's still going to have to probably approach it with building the fundamentals for this upcoming year, making sure that the defensive game has not gone away, right? That was a big emphasis in Tortorella. That will probably still be the case going into next year. And then when there's more talent and the young guys kind of mature a little bit more in their game, obviously guys like Bobby Brink improved tremendously defensively, right? Like as that is kind of built over the next year or so, then you can start establishing a more risk-taking type of environment, which is
Definitely.
what I think from what I'm listening to is what I think he kind of has in mind is, hey, look, like this is a situation I had to play with in front of me. So I'm gonna have a certain situation now. I'm gonna have to adjust my methods to adjust to the roster that I have, which I think makes a good coach. And then which is something we all scolded Laviolette about, who was a beloved coach here, but never changed his style when the Flyers had a different roster than the one he had success with, right? Which is what I thought actually ended the end of his career. It wasn't he was a bad coach or nobody liked him or any of that. Just didn't want to adjust. So I think if Tocchet keeps that mentality of playing a certain way with certain roster you have and then adjusting as you add additional talent or adjusting these specific players, I think that'll really help because he still has Jamie Drysdale on the back end. And that's a big responsibility here is with Drysdale and York and Andre. These are not like big thumping defensemen, right? And same with Sanheim, who's like a skater. Like he has mobile defensemen here. He's going to have to adjust to that as well. But we've seen him do that, right? Quinn Hughes is a smaller defenseman who is, and I remember listening to Bruce Boudreau talk about them that they wanted to make him a winger at one point. He was like, no, he was pretty steadfast as I need to adjust to this guy's game. There's something here. And then look at what he's developed now into maybe the
Yeah.
number two defenseman in the NHL. So, I do give him credit in that already, just off of what he's done in the past.
That was a big thing for me out of that quote, just the fact that he was saying like, you have to think about your roster and looking at the roster and then coming up with the system, right? Because that's the last thing you want is to bring in a coach that has this system and says, well, you got to get me these players to be able to execute this. That's how you end
I
up,
Out.
having it be a very short tenure, right?
Uh-huh.
So the fact that he realizes, hey, like we have to see what our roster looks like first. We have to analyze that and then create a system based on the roster. To me, that's really important because he realizes that, hey, I'm not going to try to force, square pieces into round holes that don't fit. I'm going to work with what I have. And if something I usually did maybe in Vancouver, back in Arizona, let's say I don't have the player particularly to execute that, I'm not going to force that and force feed that down this team's throat. I'm going to see, hey, can we do this? No, we can't. Let's try to tailor the system to a way where we don't have to do this particular strategy. But let's say down the line we do add that talent. I'm going to try to reintroduce this then, right? So I think that's really important. Just seeing that, talk it at least from that quote in that statement seems like an adaptable coach where based on the players he's going to try to make things work to try to get the team to have the most success possible. So
Yeah, yeah. Well said. Do you have other quotes that you want to bring up from that Flyers
yeah, I
Daily?
do. I think
Yeah.
one of the biggest ones for me was about the staff, right? We obviously are all interested in what type of assistant coaches Tocchett's going to bring in here. So I have a couple coaches about the staff I'll get into. So he stated, "It's important I get the right staff around me. As a head coach, the staffing is important. The assistant coach is so important for the head coach. Sometimes you might have to hire a guy that might be better than you at certain things, and you got to embrace that. You can't be scared of that. And that's one thing I gotta admit, I've never been scared of that, to surround myself with guys that might be better than me at something. And that just makes for a better environment. I have to give my staff autonomy. You've got to give them, whether it's projects or players for them, the tutelage for them. Now, obviously, we've come up to an agreement with my staff, how we want to play, our philosophy, how we deal with players. A lot of stuff like that I have to be involved with and shape our coaches about how we want to deal with things. But after that, it's their personality and the way they do things. I got to let them run with it because I don't want five Rick Tocchets in that dressing room. You don't want five Rick Tocchet coaches. It's important that you have other guys that can morph the player in a different way, think a different way. And it's important that I create that environment for our players.
Yeah, I mean that sounds great. Let's hope he hires the right people. I mean, we still have no idea. I mean, if it's Recchi and Luke Richardson, you have my excitement
That would be
immediately.
great. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think at least with Richardson being a former head coach and Recky just tons of success on the power play, like that makes a lot of sense. Both those hires, I think for me, those quotes about the coach and just not being afraid to hire guys with different skill sets and guys that are better than you at certain
I
things.
think it's a
To me,
must.
oh, it's a total must because you got to be able to empower your coaches to get your message across in your system in different ways, right? You can't keep hammering the same system, the same philosophies you're trying to get them to buy into with the same direct message. You want different messaging, for the same philosophy. And that happens when you bring in coaches that have different styles and ways of communicating. To me, though, this all goes back to like the communication with Tocchet. Like he's not afraid to sit down and think with his assistant coaches about, hey, like you guys do this a certain way and it works. Okay, let's hear about that and why. And I just think he seems very progressive in the sense that like coaches want to bring up these certain ideas or do things in a certain way. And he thinks that, hey, if that's conducive to success, I'm all for it, right? I'm all for a coach bringing up new ideas, right? And let's say doing things differently than maybe he would, but if it's naturally going to help a player understand something or like understand the system that they're trying to put into place, then it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, and we saw that here prior. Like again, it's hard for me to talk up Rocky Thompson in any sense, but we saw the difference between Tortorella and Brad Shaw. They were very different
Of course,
personalities.
yeah.
Clearly, Brad Shaw and Tortorella talked about how brilliant Brad Shaw was. Right, there's a reason he brought that guy everywhere with him. Right, so like we hope that Tocchet, applies the same methodology. And we know, and Vasili already brought it up, he had a success. He's himself was a successful power play coach. So I'm hoping he can identify that in our future power play coach, right? He knows what kind of works already, or at least has had success in the past, right? So I would hope that he can help find, the right guys to bring in here that can complement him, because that's really what it's all about. And if you're ahead of a company, the attitude is the same too. You don't want to find people who have the same strengths that you do. You want to find people who complement your strengths, right? And we kind of know what Tocchet's strengths are, right? So where I expect like different personalities and guys who probably played, if they were NHL players, played different roles in the NHL, right? You brought up Mark Recchi being like a playmaker, and Luke Richardson was a defenseman, right? A defensive defenseman, right? So different mindsets all could hopefully culminate in a successful coaching staff. I'm very excited to see who he hires next, and I suspect maybe over the next 2-3 weeks, probably by the time the playoffs end, we
Yeah,
might have a good indication on the staff
I'd
before the
assume
draft. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. I would assume to your point, Yariv, like they're probably going to have a process. Obviously, we're talking is going through the whole official hiring kind of thing and
yeah.
interviewing whoever he wants. So he's going to probably bring in certain candidates to interview, perhaps, and see where it goes from there. So
And
we'll see.
well, you
One
think
last,
real
sorry, go
quick,
ahead.
and you think about how good he is at building relationships. The same thing with Keith Jones, right? Like he probably has some names in mind, and because people think so highly of him, he might be able to get them, right?
Exactly
Like
right.
immediately.
Like a former head coach, like you said, like a Richardson, who like maybe in his position he would think, hey, I was a head coach. Why would I want to go back to being an assistant? But for a guy like Tocchet, a guy that has that cachet, maybe he would be willing to do something
He's
like
like,
that and join a certain situation. So
like I have friends that could contact me to work with them, and I'd be like, yeah, I'd love to work. Like and before I was senior than them in a position, but I'm like, yeah, but I know this guy and he's awesome. So I
yeah,
think working even for him would be awesome. Like we already have a good rapport outside of that. He already is, we're already friends. We're already, able to get along on a daily basis, right? So, because he's not going to pick people just because he's friends with them. He's going to pick people. That's what I've done in my life is, I take note of people that I want to work with in the future. Again, especially if I'm in charge, I'm like, I would hire this person.
yeah.
I would hope that he's done the same thing, and I kind of assume that he has.
No, definitely. And just to finish it off, then we can kind of get into the other topics. This is
Yeah.
the last final quote I thought was interesting. So, Jason just asked Tocchet essentially about all the different teams in the playoffs that are remaining. Now you have like an Edmonton, a Dallas, a Florida, a Carolina. They all essentially play different styles. And he was really asking Tocchet, like, do you try to like look at that and say, hey, I can take from all these type of styles and try to like what can I do and how can I employ that with the team that I'm coaching, right? So this is basically what Tocchet had to say to that. He said all different styles can win. The common goal is the buy-in. It doesn't matter what system, but for me, it's the buy-in. If you can get everyone to be on the same page, and if you look at the teams in the playoffs, the good teams don't beat themselves. They don't give up a lot, and when they do, it's got to be an excellent chance for the other team to score. I just feel intelligence is a big part of your game. I'm watching these playoffs, studying the styles, but the common theme is these teams are working so hard, it's really tough to penetrate them, and you've got to be willing to play uncomfortable, and that's why the teams are still in it. I'm sure there's a lot of guys that are banged up, and bruised, and they're going out there. It's uncomfortable, and it's hard to play uncomfortable. The other thing is they can play under pressure. Can you make a play under pressure? There's certain times in a game where there's a pressure situation, whether you got to get the puck out of the blue line or it's a 3-on-2. Can you make that play to score a goal, or on a 2-on-1 against? Can you make a play to stop a 2-on-1? Those are pressure situations, and that's something from day one of training camp we'll practice as pressure and as a team.
Yeah, yeah, and it's very true. And all four teams play a different style that are in there, and that's definitely the most consistent thing to take away from it. And look at a guy like Mark Scheifele, who obviously didn't make it to the next round, but the guy loses his father suddenly, and I've been there at the same age. Loses his father suddenly at the age of 30,
The
and
team
then
rallies.
yeah, and then the next day he's out there playing. It's like that is the type of stuff that like requires to win in the playoffs, and this is something that like Tortorella is very harsh, but the bluntness and the harshness comes from the reality of the playoffs where, your injuries, your complaints, all this stuff, it is irrelevant when it comes to the playoffs. It's like get out there and outwork everybody because
Yeah.
that is the only way because all of the teams are talented at this point, right? And some are going to be more talented than you. And don't forget, Tortorella took a team that was less talented and swept the Tampa Bay Lightning when he did
Yeah,
that with
with those Blue Jackets, that was
that
impressive.
was through determination, hard work, and a stick to systems, right? Not a talent based thing.
I would say too, right? Like if you look at this quote and you think about it, like the Flyers, what Tortorella put them through kind of prepares them for what Tocchet is talking about in a sense, like
Totally.
being able to, go through those hard pressure situations when you're under pressure, what to do in those scenarios. So I think, they're well prepared, and Tocchet obviously has a similar philosophy in terms of, okay, you all have to be on the same page. There has to be a buy-in. As a player, can you deal with those uncomfortabilities and that pressure? I think it's all very, very important factors to kind of getting to that next level. And that's ultimately where the Flyers want to go now, going ahead with Tocchet, right? They want to kind of start getting into that realm of contention here. And hopefully with the additions that maybe he can, not to say supplement, but with just his relationships and supplement, maybe he can help get them quicker and get the talent to get there and get to that point. So.
Yeah. And if you're upset about the Tocchet hire, I get it. Okay. I do. I understand. But I will say this to you. What Flyers coach has succeeded? They've all failed. Even Terry Murray was fired after going to the Stanley Cup Finals. Laviolette was fired 2 years after going to the Stanley Cup
Yeah.
Finals. They all get fired. They all fail and they all get fired. And what, 95% of the coaches in the league fail. That's the reality. So if you look at this and you go, "Oh, this guy's going to fail," probably the odds are against him. The odds are definitely against Rick Tocchet. They're against every single coach who takes over a head coaching job because you have to compete against other very competent and smart people who all have varying degrees of talent in their roster and have all kinds of things going on. Like when Tocchet was coaching Arizona, we know about Arizona. They're not don't even exist anymore because it was such a poorly run organization, right? We knew about the transition for St. Louis, right? It was Barry Melrose that he was coaching that team. He was there for a year, said that Stamkos wasn't ready to be a head coach, got fired, and then Tocchet takes over and Stamkos explodes. I think he had a 40 or 50 goal a year or something like that the very
Yeah,
next
he
year.
did.
Yeah. So again, most coaches fail, but this guy has determination, grit, has made it through and done the round. So I think I like what I hear from him. I was excited when he was hired. I would have been excited for a handful of guys, but he definitely was one of them, and I see a lot of positives to it.
Yeah,
And
like I can
yeah,
understand. I can understand just to sum it up too. I can understand the detractors. I can get people maybe
sure.
not liking it just because of, oh, he's an ex-Flyer and all that stuff. I think just look at the past few coaching hires. They have all not been ex-Flyers, and there was not a lot of success. So at this point, I just think it doesn't really matter. And maybe you could say, hey, if he was in the Flyers organization from him retiring as a player all throughout his career and he never moved an organization once, that's not the case, right? He went to different places, different stops, coached different teams, had success with different teams and winning cups as a player and as a coach. I think if you're looking at this hire, you got to come with an open mind, right? Like Tocchet's kind of stated what his philosophy is going to be. We kind of know what his strengths are going to be. Now it's a wait and see to see how we can mesh with this roster. If him himself can maybe help even attract more talent. I just think if you look at it, there's more positives to pick out just off the forefront and off the surface than negatives right now. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what he can do with this roster and kind of how his style of being a communicator can bring the most out of guys. Because I think for this team and what they were dealing with Tortorella in the past, having this open style communicator who also was a player, I think it's going to help bring the best out of some of these guys that probably needed a little bit of a refresher in terms of like the strategy from the coaching side of things. So.
Yeah, and he believes in there. He believes there's more talent here. At least that's what he says publicly. That there's more talent here that can be pulled out of these players, and I actually very much believe that as well. So I like that he said that publicly. All right. Just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications. For the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a follow and a rating as well if you can. Again, this is the best way to support our show, so please do that now if you have not done it yet. We really appreciate it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the draft. So with Toronto losing and Washington losing, the Flyers pretty much got the best situation they could have with the realistically could have with the Colorado pick. Colorado wasn't going to lose in the first round, so they did end up getting the 22nd pick in the draft. The Flyers have had success in the past with that range in general with Gagne, Giroux, Forrester was 23, Richards was 24, Konechny was 24. The Flyers, and obviously Oliver Bonk is still a wait and see. German Rupzov is really the only name I can think of in that range that they failed on. Everybody else, and again, they have a new head of scouting from that point, from the team that took German Rupzov, right? So a new start here, but they definitely have shown success throughout their history that they can draft well. So they have as of right now, we know they have the 6th and the 22nd pick. The final first round pick is going to be anywhere between 29 to 32, realistic, or 30 to 32. Could end up being 31 or 32 again. And the Flyers gain nothing on transferring that outside of the fact that it gives them leverage for this year. Where they also have 4 second-round picks. So it's going to be a very interesting draft. So I guess first thing, what are your thoughts about Flyers getting 22nd pick?
I just think for them and where they're at, like in their progress and development in general, I just think you have more flexibility, right? Like you have that other pick that you're not too sure about in the first round. Where's that going to land? Let's say now somebody who you're really enticed about drops, right? Like from the, I don't know, like 9 or 10 range to like 15 or 16. Does that make it more enticing for you now with the 22nd pick and then that late first rounder to potentially move up to get another player that you might really covet? I think it just gives you a lot more flexibility, a lot more room to play around, right? So if you're the Flyers, the fact that you're in that 22 spot, that it's not right at the bottom, like you're 10 spots removed from, the second 32nd overall pick, the last pick in the round. So you're still in a pretty good spot. Let's say you get like the 28th pick, perhaps. Maybe that's Edmonton's pick or something. Then maybe you're able to move up right with 28 and 22 into the mid first round. So
Yeah, I think they could even do it with an early second round pick
that's what I
potentially.
mean. Yeah.
And I know you haven't done your research on the draft. I have been kind of digging into it more and more. I can tell you guys just off the top of my head, there are several players that I would be interested. Not top of my head, I'm looking on a list here, but there are several players out there that I think could be interesting. The 2 guys who stuck out to me, Cole Reshney. Again, undersized center, had 92 points in 62 games in the WHL. Benjamin Kindle, he's a winger, but 99 points in 65 games. Cullen Potter's out there, who apparently I've seen him as high as 13th in the draft. But also going in the 20s. There's the number 1 goaltender, Ravensburgen. Also, he's supposed to be, around the 20 range. And again, the Flyers don't have a guarantee in net. Quite frankly, yeah, they might opt to take a goalie in the first round. Unlikely. But there's some defensemen out there. Cameron Reed, there's Braden Coots, there's Keshwan Atchison, who I've seen as high as 8, and then I've seen him as low as 20 something. There's just a good amount of names already out there, and I suspect even the lists we're looking on at line, they're probably not accurate to how NHL teams view this draft. So I suspect the Flyers are going to walk away. Now, we keep hearing that this is a weaker draft. I always like to go back and look back in retrospective. There's nothing about this draft that tells me it's a weaker draft. The reason they say that it's a weaker draft is because it lacks that guaranteed bona fide superstar player, and the best drafts have maybe one or two of them at the top. This one, maybe Schaefer and Misa are that guy. They look to be that. Schaefer's a little bit of a question mark because of the injury, so you didn't actually get to see. But his age being so young, it's like you double up on that. But that's the thing. I like went back and retrospectively look at last year's draft and looked at the top performers from a progress standpoint. So guys who did better than their previous year or considerably better than their previous year. So they didn't just do the same or even slightly worse in production than they did. And I'll tell you, the number one guy that I saw that was taken outside of the top five that had a better second year than the first year was Jet Luchenko. He's the only guy that I saw that like literally his point per game went up considerably in comparison to what he did the previous year. So when you look at a lot of this, like age really matters. So a lot of teams that are, and you see guys kind of get taken, like guys who I a little more scared of, though I was scared is a strong word, and I would still take him at 6, but like Porter Martone is 2 months older than Jet Luchenko, right? So like putting up 98 points, is not that impressive when you compare him to Jet Luchenko, who probably, if he didn't miss the beginning of the season, also would have put up
Or
90,
was on a good team.
right, also would have put up 90 some points on the year. A guy like Roger McQueen, also old for his draft year, and if you compare him, he's essentially almost the same draft as Jet Luchenko. Jet Luchenko outperformed him at that same age. So these are things to kind of keep in mind. So it's not a bad or weaker draft. It's an average draft that lacks the predictability of the Michkov draft, where you looked at the top of the draft and people can say whatever they want, retrospect. But like they knew for a while Bedard and Michkov were at the top of that draft and they were going to be elite, right? And then you throw on the Leo Carlson and you throw on the Adam Fantilli. That's what makes it a strong draft. But the guys below it, it's about the same as this year. So we're not taking anybody in the top, 3 anyway, right? So as far as it goes for the Flyers, this is a normal draft. Absolutely normal draft. And again, I was telling Vasili before we recorded, I went back and did the experiment that me and him did with you guys where we started off at like 2000.
Yeah, we did 25 years, I think.
Yeah, 25 years. I went back and did 55 years. And I can tell you, I looked at all the drafts, almost all of them. I skipped like the 70s. I went to the 80s. And I don't know this exact number off the top of my head, but the amount of drafts that I saw where the number one guy or number two guy ended up being the best player from that draft, it was like 5. So I want to make it very clear when you hear these people talk about like definitives, they don't really exist in a draft. And if you want to really see it, go look at the NBA drafts and how many of those guys don't end up like the same year that the Sixers took Joel Embiid at 3rd overall, who should have been the 1st overall, but because of injuries, he dropped down, but he was the clear-cut number 1. Jokic was taken in the 2nd round, who's arguably better than Embiid. So it's like for all of this stuff about like guarantees, this is why I love how many picks the Flyers have. It's about odds, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And they have 7 opportunities to walk away with a star player in the first round.
Yeah, exactly.
Or in that range.
Yeah, well, you have 7 opportunities to walk away like in those first 2 rounds, right? Where they're picking. But I would say too,
odds.
like if you look at that, to your point, right, you have more odds to pick more players, so the chances are you're going to hit on them. That's the main thing. Yep. But really, it's not just that. You have those same lottery tickets, whatever you want to call them, right? That you can also, put out into the open for other teams and say, hey, like I have these tickets, I have these lottery odds, I have a lot more than you. I'm willing to get rid of some of them because you want some more odds yourself to get some surefire things potentially in the draft. So let me trade you some of this because you want to, get a certain pick or certain player. And now we get a sure thing that's actually on an NHL roster. So there's two ways to look at it. I just think Briere's positioned himself really well because not only can you draft all those picks if you want to really build up your prospect pool, then you could maybe trade some other assets you've already drafted in the past that are getting kind of on the higher age of things here. It's almost like a swap out. You could do that, or you could maybe trade some picks for players potentially, right? If there's certain teams that want to deal and they want to maybe move some guys out and you want to add to your roster, you can do that too. So I think you just put yourself in a really interesting position, and I do wonder just the fact that the draft's decentralized for the first time this season. Will
Will we
that be
see? Yeah,
conducive to more trades, right? And
I think so. I
that,
think it
if
could be.
that is the case, they're really in a perfect position because usually we've heard in the past that the draft and everybody being there actually stops certain trades from happening because you teams hear of certain things and then bidding wars happen and it kind of stalls things. Where I wonder now, you have more draft picks, more conducive to trades in that format. Maybe you see the Flyers wheel and deal a little more. So it's gonna be interesting. You have so many picks. Will they make the picks? Will they trade them? There's a lot to kind of dissect, but we're gonna get there soon. The draft's coming up. I'm excited for it.
I think they make at least five of the picks, and I kind of hope they do because the Flyers, this is probably, they could end up like with the 10th pick next year, move up like the Islanders or something. That could definitely
Yeah, you
happen.
never know.
But probably their last time picking high. And this is an opportunity, and again, a draft that was not seen as a weak draft. They do this every year. They get to the draft, they overanalyze all the players. The players don't produce as much as they thought they would, and then they
Yeah.
start saying it's a weaker draft. That's not necessarily the case. Development is an up and down roller coaster, and it's very rare that these players outdo themselves every year from the previous year. Usually there's a hiccup here and there. So I'm really hoping that the Flyers fill out their prospect system and go, okay, we are full now. Because even if you draft a guy, it doesn't mean the value of trading him completely goes away. He's still a prospect. You could potentially move him later, right? But I really hope they just fill out their prospect pool and be like, we're probably not going to get a slew of picks like this again in the near future, right? So odds are I want them to fill out their what they need. They need another goaltender. They need probably two more defensemen to draft, and they need three more forwards to draft at varying points in this draft. They can do that all in the first and second round if they really want, which I doubt will be the case. But they probably will take a goaltender in the second round. That I can definitely see, and try to grab one of the top three goalies available. And then also make sure that they find one or two offensive players or maybe a defenseman in the first round, right? So that's where I kind of see it as like five picks are necessary this year, and they really need to go in that direction. Could they move some of them for players? Yeah, for sure.
That's
I'm
why
open to everything. I
No,
really
for
am.
sure. For sure. I just think, like I said, it just gives them a ton of flexibility, right? Like you can enter any conversation now at the draft in the sense of like, hey, somebody's available. We have seven picks, so we could really make anything happen, right? If
Yeah.
we want to. And that's the thing where if you look at the past and the past Flyers regimes, historically, at least this past decade, they have not been flexible and had the ability to enter those conversations and make those types of moves, right? So you want to be able to put yourself there because that's how you strike the best deals. You might be able to get certain players that you might have never been able to because you have that leverage or you have a pick a certain team might want because they want to draft some player. You never know, right?
Yeah. And like I look at this draft and like a guy like Victor Eklund is like 7 months older than Anton Frundell.
Yeah.
That's important to me. Caleb Denoyer is at a nice age. He's like a little bit older than Frondell by a month. Jake O'Brien's got a June birthday. Like I look at this stuff and I'm like, this will probably change on how some of these guys are viewed at the draft because if you're like 8 months older than the other guy, well, then your production is it could be a little illusionary, right? Because you're more physically developed than the 17
No,
year
it's
old.
it's true.
You're
It's totally
18,
true.
right? So, and we see that. We see that with the prospects. There are guys who are 20 in the OHL or 19 in the OHL, ridiculous numbers, and they get drafted, the next year in like the fifth round, right? Because they're a year older and they kind of expect them to do better at that point. So I think it's going to shift a lot of it. And that's where I look at a guy like Jake O'Brien who could be more valuable at the draft. He sits right under 6 in a lot of
Yeah.
the mock drafts. I'm still pretty high on Denoyer, Frondell. Higgins is still my number one. Frondell is my number two, and Denoyer is my number three. I'd be happy with of several of these guys, Eklund included, even though he's not a center. I just want to make sure we hit. In my opinion, when you draft at six, you have to make sure you hit. That
Yeah,
that's
when you're in the
that's it.
top 10, when you're in the top 10, especially where the Flyers are,
Gotta hit.
and yeah, and you're in the position that they're in, like where you need high-end talent. You need to add talented players. This is your opportunity, right? So I think, like you said, for me, I mean, Frondell, Higgins are probably the top of my list, but you never know as well. Like I said, right? You have those two picks. We always say, how often do you see a team trade up in that top five? Not very often, but you never know if the Flyers are really in love with one of these guys. Maybe they're willing to trade some of those picks to move up and really get their guy, get that star. Like it
Yeah.
remains to be seen. So I just think there's a lot of things on the table for this draft, just with everything in place for the Flyers, the cap space, and the draft capital.
And I actually went back and I looked at Nathan McKinnon and I looked at his numbers in juniors compared to Caleb Denoyer, and Denoyer had better numbers in his draft year. And it's just interesting how like you can't just go off of numbers either. Obviously, McKinnon was the best player to take from that
Oh
draft.
yeah, of course.
Jonathan Drouin had ridiculous numbers in
It's
juniors,
not always going to
and
translate,
yeah,
right?
and he's a middle six forward at this
Yep.
point in his career. That's why I look at age because like the age is gonna tweak things a little bit for you. And I'm not in the cap that or in the camp that Jet Luchenko is a third line center. I don't see that. I still see him as a potential top line center. You might not be as pizzazz as a guy
Yeah.
like definitely not
Yeah.
like a guy like Misa, but can he play against the best players in the world? So far, he's done that for his age group, and he's hovering around a point a game. And I think he would be around like if this was his draft year this year, I think he would be around five or six. I know that I'm in a different camp with that, but he's definitely going to be sitting with like the Jake O'Briens and the Victor Eklund guys because if you look at his production, he would have been an 85. If he was on a good team, he would have been a 95-point player in this year, and he's also two-way and probably would be the fastest skater in this draft too. So I think they made a smart pick with him, and I think the age. The more I think about the age thing, it's not the only thing that matters. Don't get me wrong; it's a multi-prong thing when you're looking at these guys, but it is a big thing because of the projection runway that they have in front of them and the comparables of where their body is. And you look at Luchenko and how physically fit he is, how physically mature he is, how he was able one of the only players from the draft, if not the only other one outside of Celebrini, who also was very fit player, also a later birthday. There are indications out there, and he's not a Celebrini. Don't get me wrong. So Celebrini right now had an exceptional rookie year, so that's a hell of a first overall pick. He's a Crosby like, in my opinion. All right, let's talk about the playoffs, and then we'll end on a little bit of Phantoms and prospects talk. I'm gonna do the usual thing. I'm gonna bring up the. This is gonna be an interesting conversation. I'm gonna bring up the screen here. Share.
I will just say before you share,
Yeah,
like
please go
we've
ahead.
been spoiled, man. This
Great
playoffs, just in
playoffs.
terms, yeah, just in terms of like the game to game, just the competitiveness in each game. Like this has probably been, I would say, one of the best playoffs we've seen in like the last 5 or 6 years for me.
It's been very good, except for Toronto's last game.
For them, it sucks. I mean, if you're a Panthers fan, obviously you're excited.
Yeah, let's start off on the West Coast. Let's leave Toronto for last because that's probably going to take the longest. So, Dallas did end up beating Winnipeg. Very well fought series by Winnipeg. It actually shows how
Yeah.
good St. Louis really was this year because Winnipeg did play much better, even though they lost in six. They were in pretty much every game.
They could have went to
Um,
seven, right? Like when you're in
yeah,
OT in game six, the way they went, like it's a coin toss at that point.
yeah.
It was such a close game.
And Dallas is now officially healthy, I guess, for the most part. I don't know how healthy Robertson is and Heiskanen, but
But they're
hopefully
back, yeah.
hopefully they get more healthy. But Dallas was the right team, and this was the matchup we wanted to see: Dallas versus Edmonton. Edmonton looks stupid good right now.
It's
I
the
mean,
rematch from last Western Conference final,
yeah,
right? So we'll see what
yeah,
happens.
yeah, and Edmonton is they're
I
good.
was surprised. I was surprised by them like beating Vegas 4-1. I thought it was gonna be
Yeah,
a closer series.
and it
Like,
wasn't.
yeah, for me, it's just like their goaltending was so bad in the first round. So naturally, I just thought, hey, you're going in with Pickard, then Pickard gets hurt, and I'm just like, Skinner's been really bad. Like this is all aligning for them to just have a bad goaltending performance. Then he comes in and gets two shutouts to end the series and totally turns the whole narrative around on its head. And
Yeah.
you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then and then Aiden Hill completely, not to say collapses, but just wasn't making the saves that you saw him make when Vegas made to the Cup final. He just
Yeah.
was not as sharp. And it kind of flipped where you were like, at the onset of the series, you're like, hey, Vegas has the goaltending edge. And then by the end of it, you're like, no, actually, Edmonton somehow has the goaltending edge, even though they've been so bad throughout the season in net, which is hilarious.
Yeah. Now, I've been right about every series so far. This is the hardest one for me to predict. Dallas versus Edmonton.
Okay.
I keep saying that you don't bet against McDavid. I look at Dallas's team and I think they're a better team top to bottom than Edmonton. This is the only time I'm gonna not bet against McDavid. And in my gut, he's gonna make you eat those fucking
Probably he's
words.
going to have a hat trick in the first game against Ottawa
Yeah.
now, Yuri.
So for me, it's really a toss up. I'm gonna go with Dallas because they were my initial choice to make it out of the West.
Okay.
But with how well Edmonton played in the second round, it does scare me now for Dallas.
Yeah.
But Dallas being at least with their full roster, and they do have Rantanen, who's like been next level as well. I think they can match Edmonton and everything that Edmonton has, um, outside of McDavid. Like McDavid is the
Oh,
big
yeah. Oh,
X
yeah.
factor, but they also have a better goaltender. They have a
Better
deeper D.
defense,
Yeah, they
better
have a deeper
depth on
forward group.
forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so and they have the superstar. They would actually have two if you really look at it: Heiskanen and Rantanen, and then Robertson's like arguable. Wyatt Johnson's on his way there. It's like they have
Hintz is a star.
right. Right. Uwe Hintz is a star player, so
Sagan and Duchesne can have big games at any given moment.
they
So
just have the same mix that Florida has, right? Like Florida's got it all, and Dallas has it all.
that's the team out of the
But
West in terms of like the depth and who has the,
yeah,
the top to bottom, just the best roster, like tangibly when you point at it, looking at the teams that are remaining, right? Um, I mean, well, at least in the West anyway. If you look at Florida, I mean, that's a toss up for me. But I would say Dallas Edmonton. Like I picked Dallas. That was my team from the West that was gonna do it, I believe. They at this point, I just think the depth, right? Like you look at
yeah,
the depth, you look at the goaltending for me. I think Ottinger is far more superior than Skinner and Pickard. Obviously, they both made me eat my words the last few rounds. Like you said, right? You can't bet against McDavid. I'm gonna bet against McDavid again. I've been doing it every round and I've been getting it wrong. So we'll see. Maybe this time I'll finally get the bet right. I just think even talk with like some friends about the series because we thought, hey, it's gonna be like a crazy series just in terms of like back and forth. I think it's gonna be really close.
yeah,
I just think at the end of the day, like Dallas and their depth, like look at Dallas's third line versus Edmonton's third line. Just that depth of having like a Granlund, you have Ben, you have Sagan, like Johnson, just that forward. So they're just stacked, right? So I just think it's going to end up being too much for Edmonton. But like we all always say, you can't count McDavid out. He could come out and him and Draisaitl could completely tear Dallas up in terms of like goal scoring opportunities. So it's going to be a high flying and interesting series, that's for sure.
I think if Edmonton wins this series, they're gonna win the cup. Like
I
that,
would say that's a pretty, good assumption to make at that
yeah,
point.
yeah. Because if they can beat Dallas, they can beat Florida.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. So let's go over to Carolina, Washington. So this was not close. I mean,
I wanted it to
Washington put
be
up,
close,
yeah, Washington
but
put up an admirable fight, but it was kind of like Vegas, Edmonton.
they
Like,
just got forechecked to shit by
yeah,
Carolina.
Carolina looks good. I mean, they always look
I,
good, but this might be their year to
I
beat
wouldn't
Florida. It's
mind.
possible.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind to see it for Carolina. Like, think about what the past 6, 7 seasons they've gone to the second round or potentially. Is this the first time they're reaching the conference finals under Brindamore? I'm not too
Maybe. I
sure.
don't remember.
Maybe. Either way, you look at the past almost decade, like Carolina's been that team that's making the playoffs, always a competitive team, always really good in the regular season. Eventually, you would think the stars will align for them and they're going to go on a deep run. This obviously is it, right? They made it to the conference finals. Now, can they hold off a Florida? I don't know. Who's to say? I think Florida, in terms of like the star power, like upper echelon, high level talent might beat a Carolina out. I just think Carolina's structure, their forechecking ability, like no matter what, they're sticking to their system and they're playing it right. And that was evident against Washington. So I think Carolina, they could have the potential to maybe beat Florida. I think for it to happen, though, obviously, I think Freddie Anderson's going to probably have to have like probably one of his best series, right, ever. So
Yeah. It's gonna be very interesting. And then we'll get to the Pierre Resistance, the Florida Toronto series.
oh
Obviously,
well,
Florida won game seven in an embarrassing fashion. In Toronto's case, they lost 6-1 after, having a 2-0 lead, losing the lead, fighting to come back from 3-2, coming back home, and then just completely shitting the bed in game seven, as a lot of people expected them to.
man,
It was ugly. The response to it has been ugly. I will say that Florida was clearly the better team
more deep,
going
yeah.
into this, and I do believe that Toronto did a very admirable job staying in this. They did have two clunkers in there. They did also have those clunkers with, not that Wall played terrible, but they did it without their starting goaltender as well. I
Yeah.
don't think that should be forgotten in this at all. It might have ended. They might have actually gotten past Florida if they
If they,
didn't.
yeah, if they got that 3-0, and if they were able to go up 3-0, let's say it's Stolarz in that overtime, maybe it's different. I think
Yeah,
then for sure it changes. But Wool, I mean, you can't blame him, right? Like he played really
no,
well. So
yeah, yeah. He had a shutout in there too.
yeah,
So yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's tough. Like I don't even know what to say for the Leafs. Like, man, like those games 5 and 7, you lose 12-2 combined at home. Like, that's it's brutal for your fans. I think it's just brutal for the Leaf fans in general. Like they almost did it again to their fans. Like they really reeled them in up 2-0, then to lose three in a row and go down 3-2, only to come back. You almost would have wanted them to lose if I was a fan. Like if I was a fan, I would almost have wanted them to lose game five, then go or game six, I mean, then go back and then get shellacked 6-1 in game seven. Obviously, you don't want to have that mentality because anything can happen in a game seven. But as a fan, you're like, again, this is happening again. So I'll read some stats, and they're not good stats for the Leafs, but um, in do or die games in the Matthews era, the Leafs have lost 20 in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2024, 2025. Um, other than the game five series that they had against Columbus, they're all game seven do or dies, and they lost that game five series two to Columbus. So they just in these big pressure situations, like the Leafs just do not execute or get the result. It's tough because I think this is probably the closest they've been
Hmm.
in one of these situations to being there. But just for you to go up like to lose 6-1, man, in a game seven, that's just brutal.
Yeah,
And to have, I don't know if you saw Mitch Marner yelling at the team like during
yeah.
they're down like 4-0 and like he didn't score or do anything. So I don't know, just to do that. Like I get as the leader to be yelling at the bench like that, but I don't know. And then to hear Matthews say after the game like there was a lot of passengers, like he scored one goal that whole series. So for you to come out and say that as the team, I thought we played well, but there's just too many passengers. Like you were the passenger yourself. So that's kind of nuts.
Well,
But so
to their defense, that team did not score unless the top guys scored. Like
no,
this,
of
the
course, of course.
secondary scoring was like pretty much almost non-existent to
In
some
round
degree.
two for sure, yeah.
And that's, yes, round one wasn't as big of a problem, but that's why we talk so highly about Dallas and Florida.
They
It's
have the
like
depth.
they have the depth to win, and depth usually wins championships. I think a lot of people want to blow up the Leafs. I think that's a humongous mistake.
It's
Even like
over,
losing,
Yariv.
yeah, look, that might be what they end up doing. I still think it's a mistake. I think you lose majority of the time. Most of the teams that we have seen, or a lot of the teams we've seen win cups, lost endlessly. I guess the way the Leafs lose is why people are reacting.
Yeah.
But they lose endlessly until they eventually figure it out. That's what I would bet on the Leafs, because I don't really know what their option is beyond that. Because their option beyond that, okay, you let Mitch Marner go. Who are you replacing him with?
Yeah, I mean that's going to be the key, right? Like who's the replacement for Marner? We're going to have to see. I think for them though, like I don't think they're going to blow it up. I just think Marner's gone. That will be
Well,
them
he might
blowing
not
it
want to
up.
come back.
He may not. I just think the Leafs in general, like they're going to make a change now after what's happened. Like it's been almost a decade of the same players, same results. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Well,
To your point, right? You look at Washington. I mean, they could have blown it up. I just think just the situation with Marner now, it's getting too untenable. Like the fans are turning on him. You can't do things based off the fans, but they're turning on him. The city's turned on Marner at this point. From somebody living here in Toronto even before this playoff, it kind of felt like that. So I just think the writing's probably on the wall for this core, that they're going to make some sort of a
I
change.
I will say this. Last year when they lost, everybody said he was gone, and I said
Yeah,
nope.
I just think it's different because I think Shanahan's also going to get fired
There,
too.
yeah,
So that's where it's going to happen, right? Like
there.
you're going to fire the guy who's kind of put this vision together,
I
and then from there it's all going to
I
devolve a
just
little.
think there's something to appreciate about a team that can compete at a high level. And again, they lost to what is arguably the best team in the league,
Of course, of course.
right? Where they did have a lead on them in the series and they didn't have their starting goaltender. Like the way I kind of see it is like you're actually not that far away. You just
No,
don't have the depth in your organization. So if you are losing Marner, okay, but then you got to fill out your roster. And I don't look at this team as like this team's not worth watching, or I think because people did that to the Flyers teams that couldn't win a cup. And like, wouldn't you rather have that than the team that's at the bottom of the league every year? So I
yeah.
kind of see it as like you ride the horse as long as the horse, looks like it could be a champion. And I think if they continue to make moves and find right tweaks, they could do this. Like we watched Carolina fail over and over and over again. They didn't blow it up, right? They're not getting rid of Aho. They're not doing all this stuff. Now the problem with the Leafs made is they kind of went all in on this year. They don't have
That's what
any
I
first
mean.
round
Yeah.
picks. They traded their prospects away. But like you can't really trade Marner. I mean, I don't really know what they could
Well, the
maybe
thing
get a
is they
second
they
or
fucked
late
they
first round
fucked
pick.
up from a managerial standpoint. Like now you can get if you know he's not going to sign back now, you literally just lost a 100-point player for nothing.
Right.
They should have traded him. Like if I was the
They
GM,
tried, I think.
no, they tried, but I mean like like oh, we tried to get him to waive his no move, but really that means they were doubling down on this team thinking that they could do it. Like they need to force him to waive his no move clause. You're the GM, find some way to make it happen. You can force a guy to get out of here. Would you have made that trade for Rantanen now if you could have done it? I
Well, I
mean,
think they wanted to. He
of
he's
course,
he's
of
the one who
course.
nixed it, from what I understand.
No, I know, but there's got to be a way as a GM that you can force a guy to be like, okay, sure, I'll do that, right? Like there are ways. Either way, I would say for the Leafs, like there'll probably be some change. I'm interested to see what it is from their perspective. Like to your point, right? They've been really close here. What can they do now to kind of get to the point where they have that intensity in these do or die games? Because just for me, it just seems like they just aren't able to be as intense as the other team, like in all these situations. Like you saw the third goal that they let in last night that I saw. Like you have Marner in the middle of the ice, gives it away, and it ends up in the back of his net. Like, you're one of the best players. You can't be making those giveaways in the game seven. I think that's where the fans get frustrated that they see these star players making these plays in these critical moments, and you're like, to be a winner, you can't be doing that, right?
Yeah, because I know if I'm the Flyers, like I'd be open for Marner, and I don't think he's coming
They
here.
should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are going to be lots of teams who want him, and most teams are not going to want to trade anything significant to negotiate with him early unless they know that he's definitely going to re-sign there.
Of
Um,
course.
they could try. Like I was thinking about, it, I was like, I don't know, could you offer him Owen Tippett? That would be like probably one less than half of Marner's next salary,
I mean, if I'm
right?
the Flyers, I would do that because then you get rid of 6.5 million and
Right.
you add 12 or something. You really just you're at like a net positive in a sense based on the production you'd get. So
Right. So like there are team and I don't know if the Flyers are going to do anything like that, but I just mean like there are teams out there that could offer that type of swap with them.
just
Um
so the Leafs get something out of it, they might be
yeah.
enticed. Yeah.
I think I'm a little easier on them because I believe it's very difficult to win the Stanley Cup. So like when I see that happen, I'm like, I look at their competition. I look at how good they were. They probably put the best effort. They did actually put up the best effort of all of the secondary teams to make it to
Yeah.
the Final Four. So like I don't, I do see. I saw the stats, with Marner and with Matthews. Nobody's talking about trading Matthews, right? It's just like I feel like Marner gets like kind of picked on because he's the local boy, you know.
Yeah, maybe, but I will say, like to your point, somebody online, I think Steve Dangle went over it last night. He had a legendary post game
Oh, I
last night. It was
listened. I
fucking
listened to both.
hilarious.
And
He
he makes
said,
fun of the fact that we all joined to listen to that
no,
moment.
dude, I thought it was funny because he was saying in games, I think he went through like games five, six, and sevens. They went through, I think, Nylander, Marner, Tavares, and
Yeah.
Matthews. And
Matthews, it's
yeah,
sorry.
Marner had the least amount of points in all those games against all with all those guys. So like if you want to tangibly look at the stats, like he does produce the least when it matters the most out of all the core four. So if you're gonna get rid of a guy, if you look at the stats and then you look at the ice, what he did, like what? Man, like that last game, that giveaway he made, and then even in the game six where he made what was it, the game I don't fuck. I forgot what game it was. He made some stupid pass where he backhanded it into the middle of the ice right up the middle. Like it's just stuff you don't do in the playoffs that you learn at 5 years old. Like why are you doing a pirouette in the middle of the ice and doing a
Yeah.
backhand saucer pass and giving it away, and then Florida goes down the ice and scores? Like that's the stuff that people see and they're like, dude, get rid of this guy because you can't do shit like that in the playoffs and expect to win. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I understand. I get people's frustrations. I think the frustration will probably die out when you give it a little bit of time.
oh,
We'll
of
see what they
course,
end up
yeah,
doing. I could definitely see him going to a place like Carolina though, who like lost out on Ranton, and then all of a sudden they get Stan Coven, 2 first-round picks,
and
and then
Marner,
and then
yeah,
Marner, which would be really interesting. But like I think he's probably gonna want to go to a competitor,
yeah,
a team that
maybe
can.
LA. I don't know. Sounds
Yeah,
interesting.
maybe Los Angeles, like a team that's like on the cusp, needs a star player. I did hear Utah floating around there too, like teams that have money. Maybe Boston, team that's trying to reignite their
Yeah,
team.
him and Pasternak would be interesting. That's for sure.
Right? Yeah, they'll have plenty. He's gonna have plenty of options out there, but
Who
Tavares, I imagine, is gonna be a free agent then also.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I was just gonna ask to end it off here. Like, who's your cup winner here?
Man, it's a hard question.
Oh yeah, of course.
The odds are against Florida because winning back to back is like almost impossible. I'm gonna go with Dallas for now because of that. But if Dallas loses to Edmonton, my pick is the Oilers.
Okay. I think Florida beats Carolina in six. I think they
Okay,
go to the finals. I think Dallas beats Edmonton in seven. I think it goes 7 games.
sure.
And then I think Dallas takes it. I don't know in what amount of games, but I think Dallas will take it.
Yeah, I think Dallas is the most cup built team in the playoffs
They have the depth,
outside of
uh,
Florida,
and they
but
have
it's
the
so hard to
experience. Yeah,
to do it twice.
no, man, they have the depth, they have the experience. I saw some stat. I can't remember what it was, but it was like Dallas, I think, has been to the conference final of the last 4 or 5 seasons. So, like, when you've been to the conference final that many seasons, you learn from those experiences. Eventually, they're going to get through to the final here,
Right.
right?
And that's goes back to what I was saying. It was like, that's what this is. It's a grueling process of several years of falling short until you eventually figure it out. And I did hear people say, and maybe this is credit to Toronto, is that the cup team, and this is probably true, the cup team for the Caps that won the Stanley Cup, that was not the best of the Caps teams, that Barry Trotz team. On
Yeah.
paper, they had better teams and they failed. Like the Leafs, they were like the same type of thing. Before that was the San Jose Sharks, who never figured it out in the end. And that happens too. Sometimes like next year Toronto could make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and then that's it. They never make it to that point again. It's really hard. It actually makes me think about the Flyers Cup team that it's like maybe Mike Richards was right. They should have kept that team
They
together and just
probably
gone
should have done
again.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
just gone again.
the thing with that team is just like they didn't really give that team itself more than one run. Like all those
Right.
players, right? Like they came back the next year, but you subtracted some guys. You didn't have Leno anymore. There's some other guys that they got rid of. So like you
Richards
never
and
really,
Carter.
Well, no, but I'm saying after that season, like they went and played Boston again, then lost in the first
Yeah,
round, then they
true.
traded them, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I mean. Like they did give him another season. They should have gave him like probably 4 or 5 more other seasons.
Yeah, that because that's really what this is.
Well,
And
what they needed is they really needed to have Carter and Richards be that second line, and Giroux establish himself as that first line player. You would have had the depth then, right? That's what they
yeah,
really needed to do. But
yeah,
salary cap doesn't help, that's for sure.
absolutely. Absolutely. All right, well, let's go to our final topic. So this is Phantom slash prospect talk, but the first one is this was news, but we decided to push it down to the end because it's not really that big of a deal. We're going to talk about Tocchet, but Rodrigo Abels and oh my God,
Oscar
Oscar
Eklund.
Eklund. Thank you. I forgot his first name for a second. Oscar Eklund have both been extended, both getting a one-way deal of 800K. A little surprised about Eklund. One getting re-signed in general, also getting the same deal that Abels got, because Eklund didn't necessarily have like a great year in the minors. He had like fine. He
Yeah.
also is 5 years younger, about 4 or 5 years younger than Abels, so maybe they see like an upside with Eklund. He's got really good size, but Abels is not surprising at all. He probably will continue to play that role of the swing guy from the NHL to the AHL, like in a call up. I think he did a really admirable job. I think he was one of the most consistent Phantoms all year. Definitely big body down the middle. Did for the Phantoms what he did for the Flyers. I think he just does his thing. I really like him as a vet on the Phantoms. I think it was a good idea to keep him. Eklund again, a little confused by it. Didn't have a great season in the minors, but again, he's still pretty young. I think he's probably maybe 26 now. So maybe they see some upside with him. I was a
Yeah.
little surprised about Eklund, but you know, probably one, some of the veterans that they plan on keeping because we still don't know about Elliot Denoyer, what his situation is going to be, or Lixell. We don't know what his situation would be, though. I would love to bring Lixell in for another AHL role.
Yeah,
But
I think both those signings, like if you look at Abels, right, he kind of impressed in his call-up. I like what I saw. So I think for the Flyers, you're thinking, hey, our center depth's thin. We like what we saw when we called him up. We even played him in a role that like wasn't a fourth line role. Like they played him with Michkov, and he looked pretty good that one game. So
yeah,
he seems like kind of like a Swiss Army knife type player. Like you could probably plug him in a lot of different places. And he would look decent. That's what it seems like to me. Lots of pro experience playing overseas, and then the AHL. I think he's like your first call up type of, oh, we need a veteran fourth line player. Somebody got hurt, bring this guy up. You can plug him in. He's gonna, be able to do the job that you need. For Eklund, I think maybe it's more about the competition. Like maybe they like what they saw from at the AHL level, like being a teammate with the young guys. And having a guy like that who's a pro, has been a pro for years, is a big body. It doesn't hurt the competition in terms of like training camp and just having hard battles out there on the ice. Like you need those guys internally to just create competition for your young players. So that's how I see it. And I think it's kind of a reward, right? Like you came overseas, you were a good soldier. We signed you to that one-way contract due to that, so you can get that 800K salary, right? So I think it's a little bit of an enticing for both players. You get the 1 year deal to stay here in the minors, but you get paid 800K, not go back overseas, and we kind of keep you as a pro to help our young guys and kind of create that competitive nature in the minors. So
yeah. I mean, Eklund had 5 goals, 17 assists, 22 points, 64 games. So,
nothing crazy.
and then 1 goal in the playoffs. He played a fourth line role in the playoffs.
Could be a
So
really good locker room guy, right?
yeah,
Like we're not there, so
I'm not sure. It seems more like a Lappy feedback type of
maybe,
signing.
but it makes
Um,
sense in that case, right? Like if
yeah.
Superior loves
He'll
him or
be
something.
he's actually older than I thought. He'll be 27 in July, so he'll be 27 next year in the minors. So
He's a veteran AHL type of player.
yeah. And the last bit of news is that the London Knights, which have two Flyers prospects on them, have officially won the OHL championship, and they are going back to the Memorial Cup once again.
Third straight season.
Yeah, not surprising at all. Their first round matchup is against the Moncton Wildcats. And that game is on May 24th. I believe that's Elliot Denoyer's team. Or not Elliot,
I
I'm
mean,
sorry,
Caleb.
Caleb Denoyer.
Yeah.
Yep, Caleb Denoyer's team. Should be a good matchup for them. They failed in the finals before. Let's hope this is their year. The other teams involved are Rimouski, Oceanic, and Medicine Hat Tigers, I believe it is. So we'll see how it plays out. It should be pretty short. It's just from May 23rd to May 30th.
Yeah, it's a short
I'm sorry, till
tournament.
June 1st. Yeah, one
It's
week,
usually it's all the winners, right, of the OHL,
and then
WHL.
and then the host team. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So always a fun tournament. I would say if you're in Canada, it's on TV usually. So give it a check if you see it on. Friends in the States, on hockey. Just if you know what that is, you can figure it out from that point. We won't say too much else, but
yeah,
it'll be good to watch. I think obviously the ultimate goal for London is winning the Memorial Cup, right? You make it there 2 seasons in a row, losing the finals, heartbreaking. You want to finally get over that edge. So I just hope for them and their players, they can finally do it this year. It'd be devastating to get there to the finals again and lose again for the third year straight. It'd be like a heart-wrenching feeling. So hopefully just for them and the hard work they've put, because it's a lot of the same players on these teams, they can finally, etch the
yeah.
win out.
And this is probably the last year for Easton Cowan, Sam
Bonk,
Dickinson,
Barkey.
Oliver Bonk, and Denver Barkey. They have a very deep team over there, so I'm sure they're going to be highly competitive moving forward.
But those guys will
Um,
want to win for sure.
yeah, and those are their best players as well. So this is a big final chance for them. Denver Barkey is back in the lineup. He did play
Yeah, he was
last game.
hurt.
Yeah, he didn't have a point. I don't know if he's even 100% yet, but good to see him back in the lineup to get a chance at the Memorial Cup. Again, he's got a little bit more time here to heal up before he's ready. I will say, I was just thinking about, I was like, man, he was like the perfect third round pick. Like, yeah, he's undersized, but the offensive upside is there. He's a captain of his team. He has a winning pedigree, being at London. It's like
Yep.
this is the exact type of guy you want to take a bet on in like the third, fourth round. I'm still really high on him. I don't know what he projects to be at the NHL level, but like I'm hoping that he's like a 50 to 60 point, player, middle six forward at the NHL level who has a lot of like the Travis Konechny vibe to him. And maybe he can be developed into a center. We all look at Braden Point, who's like, I guess, his comparable. Point was not projected to be what he is today. Maybe we get lucky with Denver Barkey and he ends up being like another Braden Point in this league. If he can even
That'd be
be
best
half of
case,
that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be best case scenario. That was one of his comparables. I think for Barkey, right, there's so much upside. Ultimately, we just got to see now when he makes the jump to the AHL level, can all those things that made him successful in the OHL still apply now that he's facing guys that are older, bigger size, things like that. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting. One random thing I want to mention
Sure.
from our cup talk was just looking at like the Western Conference Finals. So Dallas actually went in the last six Western Conference Finals so since 2020. They've been to four of the last six. So
Yeah.
for them, you'd hope they get there, man, and can make it to the finals eventually. Because a lot of players there, have a lot of heartbreak, right? When you go to the conference finals that often like that. So
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's why I don't freak out the way Leafs fans freak out when they lose. I'm
mhm.
like, yeah, but you're close. So keep going. You know, I've dealt with a lot of failure and rejection in my life. So I'm kind of just like, okay, well, grit your teeth, get back up and get back out there. Like, that's it. That's it. That's all you can do. That
Oh, of course, you got to work
sulking.
hard and
Yeah. I don't
try to
blame
put the past behind you, right?
I don't blame any of the fan base for taking the time now to vent and to get it out and to freak out. Like that, I totally understand. I would feel the same way. But at the end of the day, like get back up, pick yourself up, go back at it again. Like
Yep.
most teams fail. That's what
You got to learn from
this
those
is.
experiences
Right.
and try to have that propel you to the next level,
And the
essentially.
reality is they did do better this year than last year. So
Yeah, it's true.
people
It's
can
true.
dislike that, but they did. They did do that in a very tough section win where you have to compete against the Stanley Cup and maybe the most likely to repeat this
Yep.
year. So that a team maybe is even better than the team that won the cup. So there's that too. All right, that's it for us. Anything else you want to leave our audience with?
I had an article up on Flyers Nitty Gritty, just analyzing the Rick Tocchet hire. So if you've listened this far, please check out the article. We have a ton of other articles that went up over the past few days, just going through the hire and just interesting tidbits about it. So keep supporting us. We're going to keep putting the content out for everybody.
Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, just want to remind everybody one more time just to please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notification. Get notified of when we release these episodes. Also, share our stuff out if you can. It's a humongous help. You see it on Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that. Additional shares are awesome. For the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes and give us a follow and a rating if you can. Again, that is the best way to help us grow this show. So if you like what we do, please do those things. We would really appreciate it. Also, shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for your insurance adjustment needs. They will help facilitate the process between you and your insurance company and make sure you get the best claim possible. Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And shout out to sportspider.com. They are our partners. They are an aggregator of content from all over the internet. Articles, videos, podcasts. We are their partners, so our stuff is pinned at the top when we release it. So make sure to check out sportspider.com. We would appreciate that as well. And the link is in the description for the audio and the video version of this podcast. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Vasili, thank you for being awesome as always. We love you guys. And remember, always stay good.